You save $500 a month for 3 years straight. You check your investment account expecting to feel like a financial genius, and the balance says $19,000. Congratulations, you could almost buy a used Honda Civic. Meanwhile, your coworker who started investing 10 years ago just posted on Slack that his portfolio went up $47,000 last quarter. He didn't even add new money. The market just did that for him while he was on vacation. You want to throw your laptop out the window. This is the part of wealth building nobody warns you about. The beginning doesn't feel like building wealth. It feels like stuffing cash into a mattress that's slowly deflating. You're doing everything right, maxing your Roth IRA, buying index funds, living below your means, and your net worth is crawling forward like a drunk snail. What you're experiencing isn't failure, it's physics. Imagine pushing a giant boulder up a mountain, not a cute rock you can kick around. I'm talking about a 2-ton slab of granite that barely moves when you throw your entire body weight against it. The first 100 feet are agony, your legs are shaking, you're drenched in sweat. You look back and you've moved 12 feet in an hour. This is you from zero to your first $100,000. It's supposed to hurt. It's supposed to feel impossible because right now you're doing 100% of the work. But here's what keeps people pushing. There's a specific point on that mountain, a mathematical threshold, where the angle of the hill shifts just enough that gravity stops fighting you and starts helping you. The boulder begins to roll on its own. You're still pushing, but now the thing has momentum. Then you hit the steeper part of the descent and you're not pushing anymore. You're just trying not to get run over. That's the snowball effect, and it doesn't start on day one. It starts after you've already bled for it. Let's talk about why the first chunk feels like financial torture. When you're starting from zero, your investment returns are mathematically useless. If you have $5,000 invested and the market goes up 10% in a year, you made $500. That's nice. That's dinner. But it's not life-changing. It doesn't feel like your money is working for you. It feels like you're working and your money is just sitting there judging you. The brutal truth is that in the early phase, roughly the first 5 to 7 years for most people, almost all of your account growth comes from you manually shoveling money into it. The compound interest everyone romanticizes is happening, but it's happening on such a small base that it's basically invisible. You save $6,000 this year, the market gives you $400, and your brain registers that as, I did all the work. And you're right, you did. This is the phase where people quit. They see their friend buy a boat or lease a BMW, and they look at their brokerage account that says $23,000 after years of sacrifice, and they think, what's the point? The point is that you're building the foundation for a machine that will eventually run without you. But foundations are underground. Nobody sees them. Nobody congratulates you for pouring concrete. The math says that for the average person investing consistently, it takes about 7 to 8 years to hit that first $100,000. That timeline assumes you're putting away a reasonable percentage of your income. The market does its average thing, and you don't panic sell during a crash. 8 years. That's 2 presidential terms. That's long enough to forget why you even started. But that $100,000 is the activation point. Once you cross $100,000, something shifts. Not in the world, in the equation. Suddenly a 10% year doesn't give you $500. It gives you $10,000. That's real money. That's a used car appearing in your account because the market had a good quarter. You start to feel it. Your contributions still matter, obviously, but now they're being amplified by something you're not directly controlling. Your money has started pulling its weight. The second $100,000, the climb from $100,000 to $200,000 typically takes about 5 years. Not 8, 5. Same contributions from you, but the math has changed sides. The market is now doing enough heavy lifting that the boulder is visibly rolling faster. You're still pushing, but you're no longer the only engine. This is when people start using the phrase, it's really picking up steam, and they're not lying. The compounding that was theoretical for the first decade has become mechanical. By the time you're sitting on $400,000 or $500,000, if you're lucky enough to catch a strong bull market year, your account might go up $60,000 or $80,000 in 12 months. You didn't save $80,000, you probably saved $15,000 and the market did the rest. Let me say that again. The market, this abstract collection of businesses you own tiny pieces of, earned more for you in 1 year than you could save from your actual job. That's the crossover point. That's when you realize your financial future is no longer tied exclusively to your ability to show up and trade hours for dollars. People talk about financial independence like it's some distant fantasy reserved for tech bros and crypto winners, but the reality is simpler and weirder. Financial independence starts the moment your assets generate more than your labor. You might still work. You probably will. But the existential terror of, if I lose my job, I lose everything, starts to dissolve because your portfolio is now a second income stream that doesn't call in sick. So how do you get there faster? You can't hack compound interest. It's math, not a life hack, but you can hack the inputs. The first $100,000 is 80% brute force, 20% market returns. That means your only lever is increasing how much you're shoveling into the machine. Earn more, spend less, save the difference. It's not sexy. There's no algorithm. You're just trying to feed the snowball as fast as possible before it starts rolling on its own. The other lever is time, which you can't buy, but you can stop wasting. Every year you delay starting is a year you lose at the back end when the compounding is doing the most work. Starting at 25 versus 35 might only feel like 10 years, but it's the difference between retiring comfortably at 55 or grinding until you're 70. And here's the mistake that kills momentum. You're 5 years in. Yum. You've got $60,000 saved. You're exhausted. You see a car you want, or you convince yourself you deserve a nicer apartment and you pull $20,000 out. You just reset the snowball. You're back at $40,000. That might not sound catastrophic, but you're not just losing $20,000. You're losing all the compound growth that money would have generated over the next 20 years. You're losing the exponential part. The only rule during the push phase is don't stop pushing. You don't need to be smart. You don't need to pick stocks or time the market. You just need to be consistent and patient enough to survive the boring part. The math doesn't care about your feelings. It will work if you let it. So what happens after you've crossed that invisible threshold? Once you're past $500,000 or $600,000, the game fundamentally changes. You stop checking your account every week because, frankly, the swings are so massive, they'll either thrill you or give you a heart attack. And neither response is productive. A bad month might see your portfolio drop $30,000. A good month might add $50,000. These aren't numbers you saved. These are numbers the market is just moving around and you're along for the ride. This is the part nobody warned you about. When your net worth starts jumping around by more than your annual salary, your relationship with money gets weird. You'll have this surreal moment where you lose what used to be 6 months of salary in a market dip, and you'll just shrug and make a sandwich because you've internalized that it's not real until you sell. Your coworker will panic about their $2,000 loss, and you'll nod sympathetically while privately thinking about the $40,000 your account dropped last Tuesday. You don't mention it because it sounds like a humble brag, but it's actually just math at scale. Here's where the velocity gets absurd. Let's say you're sitting on $700,000. The market has an average year, gives you 8%. That's $56,000 in growth. You probably contributed $18,000 from your paycheck. Your money earned 3 times what you saved. You worked all year, showed up, did your job, and your portfolio, sitting in the corner doing absolutely nothing, out-earned you by a factor of 3. That's not a flex. That's geometry. The curve you've been climbing finally bent in your favor. People ask me when you actually feel rich, and the answer is never, because the goalposts moves, but there is a specific moment when you feel untouchable, and it's not when you hit $1 million. It's when you realize your portfolio's bad year is still better than your good year at work. When the market tanks 15% and you lose $120,000, but it still grew $30,000 because you kept contributing. You took a catastrophic hit by normal standards and still ended up ahead. That's when you stop flinching. Now let's talk about what most people do wrong at this stage, because the irony is brutal. You spend a decade clawing your way to $600,000, living below your means, driving the same car, saying no to vacations. Then you hit the number and your brain says, I made it. Time to enjoy life. So you buy the dream house, you finance the car you always wanted, you book the trip to Europe, and suddenly your lifestyle costs have jumped 40%. You went from saving $20,000 a year to saving $5,000 because you're finally living like someone who has money. Except you just kneecapped the exponential phase. Like, Guillermo, you were right at the point where the boulder was about to roll downhill on its own, and you decided to sit on it. The next $300,000 would have taken 4 years, but now it's going to take 9 because you're barely feeding the machine. You didn't ruin your life, but you did trade velocity for comfort. Maybe that's worth it. Maybe it's not. But understand the trade you're making. The smarter play, and I know this sounds masochistic, is to keep living like you're broke for another 3 years. Just 3 more. You're at $700,000. If you keep contributing $20,000 a year and the market cooperates, you'll hit $1 million in under 4 years. Once you're at $1 million, the math is obscene. A 10% year is $100,000. You could stop contributing entirely, let it sit for 20 years, and retire with $6 million, assuming 7% growth. But if you inflate your lifestyle now, you're extending the timeline by half a decade, maybe more. I'm not saying don't enjoy your money. I'm saying there's a specific window where sacrifice has asymmetric returns. You know, the difference between $700,000 and $1.2 million isn't just $500,000. It's the difference between I'm doing okay and I'm actually free. That gap closes faster than you think, but only if you don't let off the gas. There's also a psychological trap here that nobody talks about. Once your net worth starts hitting 7 figures, you begin to feel like you should be doing something fancy with it. You see people talking about real estate, about angel investing, about starting a side business, and you think, I have $1 million. I should be leveraging this. So you pull $200,000 out to buy a rental property because that's what wealthy people do, right? Except now you're a landlord. You're dealing with tenants, repairs, property taxes, and if you're unlucky, evictions. You traded a simple automated compounding machine for a second job that pays maybe 5% if you're lucky and don't get sued. You turned your passive snowball into active work. Sometimes that's the right move. Most of the time, it's self-sabotage dressed up as ambition. The boring truth is that the best thing you can do with a 7-figure portfolio is absolutely nothing. Let it compound. Don't get clever. Don't try to optimize. The S&P 500 has beaten most hedge funds, most landlords, and most entrepreneurs over any 20-year period. You already won the game. Don't blow it trying to win harder. So here's the final piece of the puzzle. You're at $1.5 million. You're 50 years old. You've been at this for 25 years. The question is no longer, can I retire? It's, what do I actually want? Because the math says you're free. 4% withdrawal rate gives you $60,000 a year, inflation adjusted, forever. If you can live on that, you're done. You don't have to work another day. But most people don't pull the trigger, and they keep working because they're terrified the market will crash the day after they quit, or because they've tied their identity to their job, or because they don't actually know what they do with themselves. The portfolio is no longer the constraint. Psychology is. And that's a problem no amount of compounding can solve. I need to be honest with you about something most financial content creators won't say out loud. The hardest part of building wealth isn't the math. It's not picking the right funds or timing the market or finding some secret investment strategy. The hardest part is sitting on a pile of money that could literally change your life right now and choosing not to touch it. Because at one point, $5 million, you have options that would have seemed like science fiction when you started. You could buy a lake house. You could quit your job and travel for 2 years. You could write a check and eliminate your kids' student loans. All of these things are mathematically possible, and every single one of them would feel incredible for about 6 months. Then you'd wake up at 52 years old, back at work because you have to be, watching your former Snowball limp along at $900,000, and you'd realize you traded permanent freedom for temporary relief. That's the test nobody warns you about. The portfolio doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care that you're tired or that you deserve a reward. It only cares about time and contributions. And the cruel irony is that the closer you get to actual financial independence, the more tempting it becomes to sabotage yourself. Let me show you what I mean with actual numbers, because this is where it gets visceral. At one point, $5 million, if you withdraw $100,000 for something big, something meaningful, you're not just losing $100,000. You're losing the future value of that money. Over 20 years at 7%, that $100,000 would have turned into $387,000. You didn't spend $100,000. You spent nearly $400,000. And that's assuming you never touch it again. But here's what actually happens. Once you break the seal, once you prove to yourself that the money is accessible, you do it again. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. Because your brain has been recategorized from untouchable investment to available resource. Psychologically, you've moved it from the vault to the checking account. That's how people with $2 million end up back at $800,000 wondering what happened. Now let's talk about the flip side, because discipline without vision is just masochism. What does it actually feel like when you don't cave? When you keep contributing through your 50s, even though you technically don't have to, your portfolio hits $2 million at 55, then $2.5 million at 58. By 60, you're looking at $3 million, maybe more if the market cooperates. At this level, the math becomes absurd. A 4% withdrawal gives you $120,000 a year. That's not scraping by. That's living comfortably, traveling, helping your kids, and still leaving a 7-figure inheritance. You didn't just retire. You built a machine that generates wealth while you sleep, and it will outlive you. That's the difference between cashing out early and staying the course. One version of you retires at 60 with freedom. The other retires at 60 wishing they'd been more patient. But I want to address the elephant in the room. The thing that keeps people working long after the math says they can stop. It's not actually about the money. It's about identity. If you've spent 30 years defining yourself by your career, by your productivity, by your role in the company, the idea of walking away feels like erasing yourself. You're not just retiring from a job. You're retiring from being useful, from being important, from being you. That's why so many people with $3 million in the bank still show up to work every Monday. They're not there because they need the paycheck. They're there because they don't know who they are without it. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Your portfolio can't fix that. You can have $10 million and still feel empty if you've never figured out what you actually want your life to be about. This is the final boss of financial independence. Not the math, not the market, but the existential question of what you do with your time when nobody is paying you to do anything. So if you're anywhere on this journey, whether you're at $50,000 or $1.5 million, the strategy is the same. Automate everything, contribute consistently, ignore the noise, don't touch the snowball. And while you're grinding through the push phase, start building a life outside of work that you'd actually want to live full time, because the portfolio will get there. The math is relentless, but if you arrive at financial independence and realize you have no hobbies, no relationships, and no purpose, you didn't win. You just traded one prison for another. The goal isn't just a number. It's a life where the number stops mattering because you've built something worth living even without it. That's when you know you're actually free. Look, nobody's going to throw you a parade when you hit your first 100,000. There's no certificate, no trophy, no moment where the universe acknowledges that you just did something most people will never do. You'll just log into your brokerage account one random Tuesday, see six figures, and probably feel nothing because you've been staring at spreadsheets for 8 years. But that's the point. The activation isn't supposed to feel like winning the lottery. It's supposed to feel inevitable because you built a system that doesn't require motivation or inspiration or market timing. You built something that works whether you're paying attention or not. The boring middle phase, the part where you're somewhere between broke and free, that's not a waiting room. That's where you figure out who you actually are when money stops being the main character in your story. Because here's the thing nobody tells you, the people who make it to real wealth, the kind that lasts, they're not the ones obsessed with their net worth. They're the ones who got so focused on building a life they didn't want to escape from that the portfolio just happened in the background. The snowball rolled, they barely noticed. So if you're still in the push phase, grinding it out, watching your account move like continental drift, don't stop. You're not behind. You're exactly where the math says you should be. And if you're already past the activation point, sitting on $500,000 or more, don't get stupid now. The finish line isn't a number. It's the moment you realize you don't need to keep score anymore because you already built something that outlives the game.